Welcome to Story Comic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 173. I'm your host, Barney Smith of StoryComic.com, and we're excited to have back with us the acclaimed writer and artist of the Crimebusters comic series, Scott Harris.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be back. I appreciate you bringing me back. It's been quite a while.
It's been a couple of years, yeah. And so we were talking before we went live that I've been a huge fan. I've always been a fan of the Golden Age of comics. So when I first discovered you, when I first met you a few years ago at the comic convention, I saw you had this, and then you released your. I believe what it was is I bought issue 2 because it was too late for me to catch the Kickstarter for your first issue. So I have issues 1, issues 2, and then issue 3 of Crimebusters. And I'm excited. I just backed the newest Kickstarter for issue number 4 with the Krampus.
I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, I'm really excited that I'm a huge fan. And I think what it is too is like, Scott, what I love about your series is the ancillary things that come with it. For instance, when I first backed issue number 2, I got a pin. I got some trading cards involved in it too. So that's always been fun. It's just the immersiveness of the world that you've created, which you've picked up from Boy Comics, which is a Golden Age comic. And I remember I follow you on YouTube. Do you have the entire series yet?
I do, yeah. So
wow, okay.
Boy Comics, it ran for 117 issues from 1942 to 1956. I do have a complete run of all 117 issues, and my series, The Crimebusters, it picks up the continuity. So it starts in 1956, where the series originally left off. Chuck was just in the second semester of his sophomore year. So at the beginning of The Crimebusters number 1, we have Chuck starting the fall semester of his junior year in the fall of 1956. And you don't need to have read any of the original series, but I do pick up continuity elements, characters. A lot of it's, frankly, a lot of it's for my own fun because, there aren't that many people that have read the original series and know these characters, but I figure, why not bring in a character that, appeared in issue 116 or something. If I need another student, for instance, in the story, there are other students that appeared in those issues where he was at college. And it's a lot of fun. And I really enjoy doing stuff like the trading cards and the pins, because it's set in the 1950s. I wanted to give it that feel of what it was, like to, read the comics at the time. And so I have the fan club membership kit, and it comes with like a certificate for joining the Crimebusters fan club, and you get stuff like cool. The button and things like that, like you would have got at the time. And the trading cards in particular, I'm a big fan of. In fact, let me just show you the trading cards that I do. Are all designed to look like the original trading cards that Lev Gleason publisher put out in 1951. So here's one of the originals from 1951. Okay. And so when I do my trading cards, I have the same design with the white frame, the yellow border, and the original cards. I don't know if you can see it, but they have up here, this says set number 2. There was originally 5 sets of cards. So the ones that I'm printing, they start with set 6. So, just the conceit that it's continuing the stuff from the past. And again, it's mainly for my own enjoyment, because the number of people that even are aware of those cards is very small. I do have one person that reads the comic who was like, I've got to get those cards because he has a complete set of the cards from 1951. So wow. That's really fun. But there's a lot of stuff I put in there just because I love the original series and I love the characters. And I just, that's why I started doing it to begin with, is I just, it was in the public domain, and I thought, I wish this series had continued, so I'll just continue it myself.
Right. Now, how much of this, as you're doing this, is a are you doing this as you're writing these series? Because I remember last episode we talked about you did have a certain number of issues you want to produce, and if I'm recalling correctly, it was you wanted to round it up to an even number, correct?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm still working towards that. So,
Right.
Because the issues take so long for me to do, I try and have each issue be a self-contained story. So you can pick up any issue and you'll get a complete story, but there are things that sort of build from issue to issue in the background, like subplots and character arcs in particular. And my goal is that I've got a 30 issue arc that's going to be the whole series. And so it's a really interesting creative challenge as a writer, where I'm trying to write stories that make sense as a single issue, that also makes sense in a 5-issue arc, because I'm going to be theoretically, I'm going to be gathering each 5-issue arc into a trade, and then also into a 30-issue arc. So I have certain themes and character arcs in these first 5 issues, and then I've got the next 5 issues sort of blocked out. And again, you can read each individually. It's not going to get to the point where you need to have read the previous issues until issue 10, really, and then things are really it's going to change a little bit at that point, but that's still a ways off in the future.
Right. And so talk to us a bit about, I wanted to jump in and look at what you have going on here in this latest Kickstarter. Sure. So as I say, congratulations as well. You got, as of this recording, you got about a week left on it, and you've already surpassed your goal. And I think you're tapping on the 3rd stretch goal already. Is that correct?
Yep, that's right. So it's been going pretty well. I'm very happy with it. I specifically made this Kickstarter longer than the previous ones. I'm very happy that like today I just got to 70 backers. That's how many backers I had for issue 3. Wow. Issue 3 came out in 2020, so it was like right at the height of the pandemic. Frankly, I didn't have the energy to put into the Kickstarter to doing all the like promotional work. And people just didn't have as much money. So that I was down in terms of backers from issue 2 to issue 3. I sort of dropped down. But, it seems to have rebounded. I definitely have gotten some backers back from issue 2 that missed issue 3. They've now come back in issue 4 and they're getting issue 3 as well, because you can get all 4 issues here if you've missed any of them. And it's really like I have a spreadsheet with all of the backers who have ever bought my comics. So I know everybody's names. And when a backer comes in, I can see, who's backing it. And it's really gratifying to me to see the names of people that I recognize, people that have supported me in the past, particularly, when people are coming back, I might not have seen them on the last, couple Kickstarters, but they're back. It's just nice, there's people that I have never met. I don't know what they look like. All I know is that they've been generous enough to support my comic. And so like, I'll see this name come out and I'll be like, oh, it's that person. It's, it's just very happy to see those people, coming back. It makes me feel like, that they're enjoying the comic. You don't get a whole lot of feedback, or I don't get a lot of feedback, even with my mailing lists or, my social media stuff. I get very little feedback on the comics. The feedback that I get is that people come back to buy the next issue. So, and that's, I guess, the most important feedback.
Right. So, it's interesting when you look at this, is that you have issue for your regular cover. You've got and as I say, the prices are still pretty on par from what you got. And also too, is this is you always produce a fairly large comic book too. This isn't
Yeah, that's right. So this is 36 pages. Last issue is actually 38 pages. And they're densely plotted. Like there's a lot of dialogue. There's a lot of plot. I draw in an Archie style. And so I've taken some of the page layouts from Archie books. So instead of like a typical modern comics, usually a lot of them have 4 or 5 panels. Most of my pages have 6, a classic Archie 6-panel grid. And so, it's a lot, I've had people tell me that it's taken them an entire hour to read one of my issues. And I've had multiple people say, it's like a half hour. And, with independent books, a lot of times the price point can be a problem for people that are used to only buying like Marvel and DC books, because they're always going to be more expensive when we're making them ourselves. but I feel like, you can read your typical Marvel or DC book in 5 or 8 minutes or something, whereas it's going to take you a half hour to get through one of my issues. And so hopefully people are, even though it's more expensive, hopefully they're getting, their money's worth.
Yeah. And like you said, they are pretty dense. And so what's really good is that you have 11 backers coming back. And then plus your legacy variants, that you do, which I love, because those are like for those that are appreciate the collectible piece to it. What's also interesting too, if you look at your catch-up bundle, there's 6 backers on there. That means there's 6 new readers.
That's right.
That
yeah.
you have.
And I've also gotten one thing that's happened the last 2 or 3 campaigns I've run is I don't know if it's because of the pandemic or what, but I'm getting more and more digital backers, a higher percentage of digital backers. So I've actually got, I think 10 or 11 digital backers that are also getting the catch-up kit, but they're getting the PDF version. So I've got probably at least 20 new readers that are coming in new.
Right.
And that's very exciting. So there are a lot of options. I love doing variant covers. And so every issue I have 4 covers. I've got the regular cover, and then I've got the Kickstarter exclusive, which this time around is an homage to the 1975 Marvel superhero holiday treasury edition. And those Kickstarter exclusive covers are the same price as the regular covers. But they have the legacy numbering, so they carry over the numbering from Boy Comics. And then I also do the premium variants, which my 2 main characters are Chuck Chandler, the main character from Boy Comics, and then I also created Trixie Trouble, who's my homage to like Nancy Drew and Trixie Belden and Veronica Mars, a sort of classic, girl sleuth. Right. And so I have a series of covers that focus on each of them. The Trixie variants are all designed to look like the old Nancy Drew book covers, and they all feature Trixie as the main character on the cover. And then the Boy Comics ones, of course, they have the logo and the numbering from the original Boy Comics series. And Chuck is the main character on those. This time around, we're up to issue 123. So it's the 4th issue of the revival. And one of the artists that worked on Boy Comics originally was Joe Kubert. And since there's a flashback in this issue to World War II. And so I'm like, Joe Kubert's famous for all of those World War II covers that he did at DC. So this issue with the Boy Comics variant, it's a tribute to Joe Kubert, because I took one of his sort of classic designs for a cover, but I did it with the Crimebusters. There's different audiences. There's definitely a subset of people that are big fans of like Nancy Drew and stuff, and they will prefer to buy the Trixie variant over anything else. There are people that are into public domain superheroes and Golden Age superheroes, and they want to buy the Boy Comics variant. So I have some people that buy like the full set of all the covers, but generally speaking, it tends to be people buy one or the other. There's like different lanes. So they appeal to different collector sort of bases, but also, again, a lot of this is, these are things that I like. So I'm kind of doing it for myself. When I first started, my idea was to continue Boy Comics. So I always wanted to have the Boy Comics logo and numbering, but eventually I was like, it is 2022 now, and that title isn't necessarily going to bring in the readers that I'm looking for. And so I decided, and the numbering is a problem, for some subset of collectors. They don't want to start on issue 123 because they'll feel like they missed too much. So I decided I'm going to change the series name to Crimebusters, and I'm going to start with issue 1, but I still wanted to honor those legacies. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to do these variant covers. Even if nobody else buys them, I want them for myself. And I figure if I'm doing stuff that I like, there's going to be other people that like it. So,
No, and I think that's something that I really appreciate too, is your ability to, as you say, it's being able to put out as a wider audience. But also what I loved about what I love about Crimebusters is that there's a little bit of educational and historical significance on what you're doing as well. Do you want to talk a bit about that? We mentioned in the last episode that you when we were chatting about how you've kind of tweaked it for a modern audience.
Sure. I mean, one thing that I try and do is like, it is set in the 50s, and I don't want to be beating people over the head with it. You know, sometimes when you watch period like movies and shows, they have these like really blatant, like, it's in this time period, and you can tell because of all the stuff that we have in your face. And I try to avoid that, but I also am try and stay aware of, like, you know, what the people at the time would have been talking about. I try and tie in like current events and stuff in the background. You know, issue 3 has the main plot is about sort of the Red Scare in the 1950s. And there's little things. You know, this issue 4, the one that's currently out, it takes place at Christmas. It's the big Christmas dance. And so there's a scene where they're dancing, and there's people talking about, you know, hoping that the band plays the new Elvis song, because 1956 is the year that Elvis really broke out as a big star. Little things like that. And just like, you know, in the issue 2 in the Halloween, there was like a kid with an Eisenhower mask that he was wearing. He was dressed as Eisenhower for Christmas. And so I try and do that. You know, I want to, but as you mentioned, I try and update things a little bit for modern audience, like just changing the title from boy comics, and frankly, just having female characters. So as much as I love the original series, the whole idea of boy comics originally was that it was it was all boy lead characters aimed at boys. So all the characters in all the strips of boy comics originally were boys between the ages of 7 and 14, and the series and so the comic was for that readership. And as a result, if you read the 117 issues of Crimebusters stories, and there's more stories than that, because some issues he had 2 or even 3 stories. So if you read all 200 Crimebuster stories from the Golden Age, there's only one recurring female character, and she only appears in 3 issues.
Oh, wow.
And it's right at the end when he's in college. So there's one girl who's in 3, a fellow student who shows up in 3 issues. There's no recurring female characters in the entire series. And that just, not only does it not work for modern audiences, it doesn't work for me. So that's why I created Trixie. And, you know, it's very important to me to have Trixie be not a sidekick, but a co-lead. And that's another reason why I wanted to have the variant cover with her. Since I knew I was going to be doing the boy comics, I wanted to keep it balanced, because she is just as important in Chuck. In some ways, she's actually secretly kind of the main character. But, you know, I want to have, and there's other things, you know, I introduced the character of Vera, another female character who's a black character. You don't really get any minority characters really in the original series. And there's certain things where I was like, I don't want, as much as I want to have the historical accuracy from the 1950s setting, there's certain aspects of the 1950s that I don't want reflected in my stories, right? Because that's not, when I'm writing Vera as a black character, I don't want to be bringing 1950s sensibilities to the story. So there's definitely aspects where I'm writing it as a modern writer for a modern audience. But that's not to say that we won't touch on those things when necessary. You know, there's certain like historical events that I want to, that makes sense to tie into the stories that we're telling here. So for instance, you know, eventually we're going to get to the fall of 1957, and then we're going to have the stuff with the school integrations in Little Rock. And given that our characters are in college, that's something that makes sense for them to be talking about as part of that story. So that's something where we'll address that. But for the most part, like, I wanted it to, even though it's set in the 50s, to be approachable for modern readers. And, you know, as a modern writer myself, those are just naturally my sensibilities. So,
right. So how much of the, as you're putting these series together, how much of this is, as you feel like you're a love letter to the series, and how much of this is a feeling of mission to continue telling the story?
It's a good question. I would say it's more of a love letter. The further I get into the series, the further I get away from the source material, just naturally, because I'm getting further and further away. I'm introducing more of my own characters. Changes are taking place to the characters that I'm bringing in from the original series. And, I have stuff planned where, by the time we get to issues 10 or 15, it's going to be pretty far afield from where it started and the original story. So, while, I'm very passionate about the character of, Crimebuster, and I want to continue that legacy, I also don't want him to be sort of stuck in the 50s. For me, the character has to grow as a character. And when you read the original 117 issues, there is a little bit of a character arc for him. He goes from my reading from about 13 years old to about 18 over the course of that series.
Right.
And so he does change a little bit, but not that much. And so one of the things that I'm doing in this first, sort of 5-issue arc is I'm exploring, Chuck, things that came up in the original series that struck a note with me on a character level, but were never addressed because of the sensibilities of the time period. Chuck's a character who I always call him a middle-class Batman. He has a very similar origin to Batman, where his parents were both killed basically in front of him, and he wasn't able to save them, and so he becomes a vigilante. Except for because he doesn't have Batman's money, he just is basically just goes off and does it as a kid. Like, he doesn't have he can't go into 20 years of training with all the world's experts because he just doesn't have those resources. He can't get a bat cave. He can't get the gadgets, so he's just like a Boy Scout who's trying to do the right thing. But, the only real character sort of thing with Chuck that is explored at all is the fact that whenever he runs into his arch enemy, Ironjaw, who killed his parents,
right,
he kind of loses it a little bit. And which is understandable, but they never really sort of explore that. And so what I'm doing on a character level, and these are very plot heavy stories that I'm doing, but there are character elements that I try and naturally work into each plot. And so this first arc is really, a lot of it is about Chuck sort of dealing with the death of his parents in a way that he was not able to do as a kid, and sort of acknowledging the pain and grief of that. And I think that's a very natural thing that a lot of people do, particularly, people who lose their parents when they're younger. A lot of times they're not able to really process it until they become adults. While I was working on the second issue, my father passed away. And so a lot of this is, it's very personal stuff that I'm sort of working out through Chuck, but it makes sense for the character. Like, I always wonder reading this, that he gets so angry, whenever Ironjaw's around, but we never see him sad or contemplative. He's not in the original series. He's not introspective. He's a person of action. Right. And so one thing that, I'm doing is with Trixie, is someone who challenges him to sort of think a little bit more about why he's taking certain actions. And that's something I'm exploring here. And we're going to get further. So it's already kind of getting further away from the original tone of the series, but hopefully, building on that legacy.
And I noticed too, is like, you did have a bit of a pause with the fact that you came out with a one shot, the Uncle Sam.
Yeah. So, I have a lot of stories that I want to tell, and I just don't draw fast enough to do them all myself. So with Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam, I brought in another artist, guy by the name of Jay Piscopo, who's out of Portland. And the idea was basically, had some other stories that I want to tell, and Jay could sort of basically be working on the art for that while I'm doing Crimebusters.
Okay.
It unexpectedly did take a lot more of my time than I thought it would, which is one of the reasons that the new issue Crimebusters took so long to do, because just running the Kickstarter and all the fulfillment, that Kickstarter had a lot more backers than Crimebusters, because it's a sort of a high concept. It's much easier for people to understand. You just see the title, you know exactly what it's about. And there are a lot of people that are Cthulhu fans. So, you know, for that, that first issue of Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam, I had 186 backers and at $4,200.
Wow.
And so the fulfillment process of mailing all that stuff out, obviously much longer than it is for Crimebusters. And just the result was there's basically turned out to be 3 months where I did not have any time to do any work on Crimebusters at all. And so that's something I'm working on now, is to try and figure out ways to get Crimebusters out, you know, more regularly, you know, on a faster basis. It may involve hiring an artist to draw Crimebusters while I continue to write it. But, you know, I'm still in the early stages. You know, this issue of Crimebusters 4 is the first issue that's in full color. The first 3 were in black and white.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
I hired a part of that's because I'm colorblind. So I knew that if I tried to color myself, it would take so long and I'd end up with all the people would be green and stuff like that. And so it didn't make sense. But after the success of Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam, I had figured I had to build up a big enough base of readers where I could set a higher goal and get a little bit extra money to hire a colorist. And that's what I've done here with issue 4. And that saved me some time, as well as being in color. It saved me the time of doing the shading, because even though it was in black and white, I would still I'd have to color everything in different shades of gray. And so this is something I'm looking at, is bringing in more people to help me with different parts of the process. Optimally, I'd like to get to the point where instead of doing 1 issue a year, Crimebusters, I'm getting at least 3 issues out. But I think it's still going to be a little while as I try and find the right people. But with Kickstarter, there's a bit of a snowball effect that you can have. The more projects you get out, the more you bring in more and more new people to see it every time. And so your projects tend to get a little bit bigger each time. And so I'm hoping with the success of issue 4 here that I will have a big enough base where I feel like I can afford to then hire an artist to do the art. And if that's the case, instead of taking a year to draw it, hopefully I can find a professional artist that could draw it in 4 months, and then we can get 3 issues out. But finding the right people that to collaborate with, particularly on a budget, can be very difficult. And Crimebusters is very important to me, so it's not something where I'm willing to settle for something. Like it has to be the right person, or else I mean, I'd rather it come out slowly than have a book come out more quickly that I'm not happy with. So we'll see. I currently have an artist who is drawing the backup story for issue 5 right now. And we'll see how that goes, because if it ends up working out between us, then I may have him do the whole issue. And if not, then I figure, hey, I'll have the backup story done. And so I'm already ahead on issue 5, but that's sort of where I'm going. I'm not getting any younger. That would be weird if I was. So, I've got 26 more issues in this story that I want to do. And if I'm putting them out once a year, I wouldn't finish until I'm 75 years old. And there's no guarantee I'm going to reach that age. So I figure if I want to get the story told, I need to figure out ways to get it out faster. Right. And there's other stories I want to tell too. So Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam, it does take place in the same universe as Crimebusters. If you've read Crimebusters 3, Granny Gumshoe is in there. One of my favorite characters. Everyone seems to really like Granny. In Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam, it takes place in 1944 during World War II, but Granny Gumshoe is also in there, and you see her teaming up with Uncle Sam to keep the Nazis from summoning Cthulhu. And the stuff that happens in those stories are eventually going to start bleeding into into the Crimebusters. Like there's a group of bad guys in Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam called the Knights in Yellow, who are the cultists. And we're going to be seeing them in issue 5 of Crimebusters. We're going to see what they're doing 12 years later. And so, again, you don't have to have read Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam for the stories in Crimebusters to stand on their own, or vice versa. But if you are reading both, then you'll get more out of both. Uncle Sam himself is going to be in issue 6 of Crimebusters when we get to there. And we're going to see a very different Uncle Sam because Uncle Sam during World War II, the good war where we're the good guys and it's all rah patriotism, is very different from Uncle Sam during the Cold War. And so we're going to see how the effects of, McCarthyism and stuff, what that's done to Uncle Sam as a person. So again, if you read both, great. The second issue of Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam should be out later this year. It's 32 pages full color. And right now I'm just waiting for the last 6 pages of art on that. So this fall we should have issue 2. So yeah, Again, I've said this several times, but I have a lot of stories I want to tell. And so bringing in more artists that are able to tell the stories that I want to tell, like Jay, is great. And that's sort of where I'm trying to go in the future. I have more stories I want to tell, more spinoffs from Crimebusters. I have a Vera solo story that I really want to do, but I have to find the right creative partner to do it with and stuff like that. But yeah, Crimebusters is always going to be the most important. That's sort of the flagship title.
Right. And so as people are interested, they do have the add-ons where you can get, if you missed it, you can get the Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam as a PDF for $6 add-on, or you can get for $8, you can get the physical copy as well.
That's correct. So if you've ordered a physical copy, with Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam, I did a lot of much more expensive premium variants. It was kind of a test just to see how it would go, but I did variants where it was like limited print runs. And so some of those are much more expensive, but the regular comic is still the same price. Which it's a little bit cheaper as an add-on because the cost of the shipping is mostly covered already and stuff like that. But you can see some of the other variant covers here that I did that are a little bit more expensive.
Right.
But yeah, so those are available as add-ons. There's also there's one of the reward tiers that has all of the variant covers for all of the issues, both of Crimebusters and Uncle Sam. That's the highest tier. And so far, nobody's picked that one, but
I saw that one. They the one with everything, huh?
Yeah. So that's got all of the Crimebuster covers that I have. Because some of the Kickstarter exclusive covers are sold out.
Right.
And it's also got the fan club membership kit. With that one, I do a sketch cover where I'll draw whatever you want on a blank Crimebusters #1. And then it's got the set of all 6 of the Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam covers.
Right.
Some of which are very low print run, like the Hulk 181 homage. In the bottom right there, I only printed 25 of that, and I sold most of them. So there's only a handful of those left.
Right. Yeah, I saw that you only have 2. You probably only have 2 left because you only have that.
I have a couple available, I think, as add-ons as well. So I kind of split it because I figured some people might just want that one, but I think right now I have no more than 5. I think I have 5 left at the moment.
Okay.
At some point I may free up a couple more because I do have my own personal collection where I've kept a few copies of everything I've done for myself. So at some point on special occasions, I may release some of those. So that includes some of the earlier Kickstarter exclusive covers that I'm sold out of. Stuff like that. I may eventually release a copy or 2 for new collectors that missed them. But
you say, as you say, the one with everything's $255. But if you do the math, it's actually cheaper to buy that tier than it is to buy everything separately through the add-ons.
Yeah, it's also the only way in this campaign that I am offering the sketch covers, because those do take a long time. And with the sketch cover, it's Crimebusters #1. It's a blank. So I'll draw whatever you want on it, as long as it's not, pornography. And I've had some very strange requests, like the one that's shown there. The guy wanted my characters being eaten by carnivorous Ewoks. So we have Chuck being attacked by Ewoks, and then I have Trixie dressed as Princess Leia in the background shooting them. For the last campaign, I had someone that wanted me to do like a Mystery Science Theater 3000 view, where we have the the seats with the heads, and she wanted the silhouettes to be her with Walt Disney and Abraham Lincoln watching a 1940s detective movie where all of the characters were dinosaurs. So I did like this noir sort of thing, where it was like a detective with the femme fatale coming in, but they were both triceratopses. So whatever anyone wants, it's just, those do take a long time. So that's only available if you're getting that one with everything. Because otherwise I just don't have enough time to do it.
Right. Well, this is exciting. Like I said, I'm a huge fan, Scott, of the Crimebusters series. And as I say, you got some really good tiers on here, and I'm already, as I said, I'm already looking forward to reading issue #4. And as you said, so issue #5 you're working on as we speak, correct?
Yeah. So I've got an artist doing the backup story, and then we're gonna see how it goes. Optimally, if the working relationship goes well, and I'm happy with his art and he's happy with the story and he wants to do it, then I may end up. This is very tentative, but I may end up bringing him on to do the whole story. I have issue 5 pretty well worked out. And for those who've read the first 4 issues, issue 5, as I mentioned, it's going to be the first 5 issues are going to be collected in a trade. So it kind of brings together a lot of the threads in the first 4 issues, brings them to a head. So we're going to, and then we're going to have some stuff that sets up the next bunch of issues. There's going to be a couple of cliffhangers at the end to really get things in motion. Normally with the backup stories, I really enjoy doing these backup stories that sort of allow me to give time to characters who don't have space in the main stories for me to give them a spotlight, like Vera in issue 2 and Officer Joe in issue 3, and in issue 4, we got Stu, who's been missing since issue 1. We're going to go back and we're going to see what's happened with Stu in the months since the last time we saw him. But in issue 5, the backup stories are going to be more setting up the next. It's more like it's going to be some cliffhangers to sort of tease things. So, yeah.
Perfect. Well, Scott, I got to say congratulations on hitting your goal. That's exciting. And very excited to have you come back on when you want to talk about issue #5.
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, again, I'm really hoping that I can find an artist, because I love doing Crimebusters, and it's frustrating to me how long it takes me to draw stuff. I also, my art's getting better, but I'm not a professional artist. And I feel like if I can find someone who can both draw faster and better, as long as I can afford that, then that's what I want to do. Cause I want to read these comics myself. I want to have them out. I want to get those stories told. So hopefully next time we talk, it won't be too long. Hopefully it'll be, less than a full year. And hopefully I'll have some exciting new stuff to tell you about.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Scott, and hopefully we'll see each other again in a few months. pick up. What's the color? What's the Crimebuster color? It's a blue. Is it red? Right? Is it a red?
Chuck, yeah, Crimebuster. His outfit's red, white, and blue. It's red's the main color, and it's got like a blue C. And Trixie's is white with red and blue. So,
how's that? Is that a good red?
I'm colorblind, so.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, it's a good red.
Looks good to me.